I'm affiliated with a number of academic departments at my university here in Colorado, but my PhD is in a discipline called ethnomusicology. For some people, ethnomusicology simply means the study of non-Western music or folk music. For me, it is the study of music's relationship with culture and music's relationship thereafter with politics. I first started to study the far right via its connection with music. I was writing my dissertation on the role that music had played in nationalist activism in Sweden. I was studying that particular subject at a time when nationalist far right activism was transforming from being associated with skinhead style and music and primarily being a music movement more than a political movement to instead a cause that was gaining increased representation in elections, increased formal political power in Sweden's parliament, and in tandem with that was also transforming its look and its sound, moving away from that old aesthetic of skinheadism and toward one based on a more mainstream slash a more wholesome sound and look. I was interested in music's ability to tell that story. It turned out that my early focus on music was fortuitous, I think, in a number of respects. One of them was that when people heard I was a music scholar, perhaps because they didn't take that to be that serious as they would a historian or a political scientist or something like that. When they heard I was a music scholar, they were much more willing to talk to me. And so I built up a network of informants who, some of whom were musicians, some of whom were not, were casual consumers of music, that I do not think I would have been able to have built up, again, had I presented myself otherwise and had my subject been a different subject, say economics or ideological platforms or things of that nature. The second is that I think a lot of political commentators misunderstand the actual locus of politics. To study politics, in my mind, is not to necessarily study polling or voting data or even policy platforms. The values that inform our politics and that are so tied up with our identity as political actors, they live in expressive culture. They live in the teachings that we embrace. They live in the culture that we consume, the ways that we interpret and attempt to make sense of our world, and the literature that we produce and consume. And so I've found in many cases that focusing on objects like music gives me insights that I would otherwise not have into politics if I just took a traditional route. Granted, whenever my interest and my research carries me away from music, I don't feel obliged to stick to music. I'm more than happy to write essays, articles, and books that spread away from music if the subject calls for it. But I always want to have that wide lens when studying politics. I always want my considerations and my investigations to take in much more than what a political scientist would be interested in.